Welcome to the CRE Report. I'm your host, Chris Burr. Joining us today, very special guest, Noah Starr, CEO of TractIQ. They just released their Q2. This can be a lot for me to say Q2 self-storage REIT report. So we want to give you the analysis there and what he has seen as far as what the numbers are suggesting right now, what's happening within the industry. So Noah, great to have you with us. Where would you like to start, my friend?
This is awesome. So glad to be with you. So great to see you last week in Vegas. Had a lot of fun and excited to share some more great research. I think we could start with page 4.
There she
And
is.
I would love to dive into this first chart that you have up here and kind of walk through what's going on, and feel free to come in with any insights that you have too. But I think this chart is a really good summary of what self-storage operators and investors and brokers have faced in the last couple of years. So in this blue line, we have the average REIT street rates over the last 5 years. And in the red, we have the average REIT achieve rates. Okay. And throughout history in self-storage, there mostly was a premium that street rates had over achieve rates, right? And street rates, again, being the rate that you would get if you walked in off the street. And typically, if you were a long-time customer of storage, you were rewarded with lower prices, right? It was good to stay for a long period of time. And what ended up happening in 2023, 2024, when we had a slowdown in demand, housing started to fall, interest rates rose, all the standard data points that we've talked about for a long time. You saw this inversion happen where, okay, now street rates were actually lower than what customers were paying. And there's a lot of reasons why, especially, operators moving to web rates, which are the discounted online rates, right? But all of these factors culminated where now you're actually punished if you're a longtime customer in a storage facility. So we saw that inversion happen in Q4 of 2023, heading into Q1 of 2024. And that delta actually grew quarter after quarter after quarter until this one, right? So now we're finally seeing Q2 2025, a pretty big move where street rates have started to increase and the achieve rate has actually started to fall. So really interesting data here, but a lot going on in just this one chart.
So I guess bottom line this for me, how do you translate this into what does this mean for people in the business and what does this mean for customers?
I'll come to customers second, but what does this mean for people in the business? So it's actually amazing. If you look at this red line, right, which are REIT achieved rates on average.
Just for people that aren't in the business, just explain achieve rates as well.
Yeah, achieved rates are the actual average rental rates existing customers are paying on average. So you might move into a facility at $100, but after rental rate increases, you might actually be paying $130 for that unit size. So the achieve rates are the rates customers are actually paying on average. It's amazing that in a declining street rate environment like this, that red line did not fall off a cliff, kind of like this. Like you can see this, street rates almost peaked at $27, came down to $19, now close to $18. But the achieve rate actually kept increasing until early 2024 before it started gradually declining. So I think ultimately, right, it's in the long term, I think impossible to have increasing achieve rates with declining, like eventually the math doesn't math. You'd have to increase rates so much to have that growth rate. So I think for investors and brokers, this to me, hopefully, I think an inversion in this case is bad for investors and brokers, where it's really hard to underwrite. People are looking at rental comps and trying to tell the lender, yes, I know the street rate says $100 for the 10 by 10, but look at the data. There's really a 10 or 20% premium that we could get on this unit when it stabilizes. So I think that's bad for the industry, and moving in the other direction is a positive. For the customer, I also think it's a positive, because if you think about if the website price is $100, but in 5 months, you're going to be paying $130, that's a bad outcome, right? Where your expectations maybe weren't met. You maybe feel like you were misled in a sense, and you didn't have the full context as to what you'll actually be paying. So as we get away from an achieve rate premium, I think that's holistically better for everyone.
What do you make? I mean, it's a pretty precipitous rise, in looks like Q1 to Q2. What do you make of that?
I think that's the combination of things. Number one, seasonality. Q2 tends to be the busy period in self-storage, where you have the summer, you have students looking to move into units during the, once the school year ends. You have a lot of factors of, transaction activity kind of peaking in the summer times, home sales, things like that. So I attribute that mostly to seasonality. I think there's some other factors going on where you saw in California in particular, legislation coming out about storage operators need to be a little bit more transparent with their rental rates and actually show what the rent schedule is going to be for a period of time. So I think all of that, kind of culminates in this little uptick here, but probably most of it is seasonality.
Interesting. All right. Another slide you want to go to next?
Yeah, I think what could be interesting is the next slide, which is page 5.
Yeah, I like this one. Okay. Break this one down for us, please.
Yeah, I love it. So this is the REIT same store occupancy per quarter with each year stacked against each other. So it's kind of like a time series of what occupancy has looked like for the REITs going back to 2017. And you'll notice a couple of things. So I'm going to pick the best year on occupancy and then the worst year on occupancy. And surprise, surprise, what the worst year for occupancy is. But in terms of the best year, 2021 is this black line here at the very top, where you can see Q1, REIT same store occupancy, 95%. Q2, same store occupancy, close to 97%, right? So really, really strong. I mean, think about storage facilities being 98, 97% occupied with rental rates and street rates and achieve rates all increasing. Like, it was an amazing year for storage. And that's coming out of the COVID, boom of folks, all the mobility that happened, and, the boom of the housing market coupled with low interest rates, things like that. You match that with 2025, which is this purple line at the very bottom, right? And we have the lowest occupancies reported since 2017.
Wow.
So, here now occupancies for the REITs in the 91% range. And if you just think about the income loss, right, of that 7-8% of vacant units that aren't paying a single dollar to the REITs, that is a pretty major rental rate or income decline as it relates to the REITs. So really interesting time series here.
I think it's fascinating to bring it up that way, because as we've seen, I think for the first time, maybe since the GFC, was it 4 out of the 5 REITs had negative NOI, right? I think it was quarter, year over year, which is very rare within this asset class. So you speak to it well, showing the lower occupancies, obviously posing some issues now, but I think long term, I think you and I both agree, hey, the thesis is still bullish, just because smaller homes, smaller apartments, more people in multifamily. Long term, I think things bode well for storage.
Yeah, and if you think about it, right, we've had an enormous amount of new supply hit the market. So the amount of storage that needs to be full today, like, there's still a lot more Americans using self-storage today than there were in 2017, right? I wish I had the number off the top of my head, but a huge amount of adoption in the self-storage industry holistically. Yeah, maybe Public has it here in some of them.
Yeah, so you can see 1985, 2%, 2025, 10%. I think that number might actually be more around 12 or 13, of course, according to the SSA demand study, but either way, 10, 12%, it's on the rise.
For sure. And, so I think you have that going with you, or going for you. And you even think about it, 92, 91% is still pretty good, right? You think of other asset classes, if you're in office or industrial, you could have a tenant leave and you go from 100 to 0%, right? You don't really have that possibility in self-storage, which is a positive. At the same time, what I've been pretty consistent on is you have that increase of adoption of self-storage. One way to kill that adoption of self-storage is to have everyone have a bad experience in their unit with aggressive ECRIs, with, pricing that might not be super transparent, right? So I think the industry is dealing with that, and I think making the right steps to address it. But still, when you look at 91, 92% occupancy as being, historically bad, I think that goes to show you how resilient the asset class actually is.
Do you think you're going to see 2026 turn and there's going to be higher occupancy, or do you think this 26 could be worse than 25?
I hate making predictions because just because I look at a lot of data, my predictions aren't going to be worth much, especially when Warren Buffett doesn't make predictions. I think ultimately I envision self-storage holistically being more transparent. I think we're going to be working with better data. And, it goes to what we talked about maybe last week, where you had 40 or 50% of developers were first-time developers, right? So there was a lot of mistakes made in the last 3 to 4 years. I think we're going to make less mistakes as an industry because we're, again, learning from this cycle. And if you're going to do a new storage development project, there are things you need to do today that maybe you could have gotten away with 3-4 years ago to hopefully protect the market. So I think there's going to be pain. These things don't get reversed in a month or a quarter. It takes some time, but holistically, this is a big learning experience for the industry, and I think that just is positive across the board.
I agree. I just have to weed out some people. I just want to share a couple of graphs with you and then get your comments. And we brought this one before, so just so people are aware, this is public storage, like kind of a September update, if you will. Give some of the basic fundamentals. I think what's positive here, you can see the growth in the percentage of population using self-storage in the lower left-hand corner in the orange. And then you can see the blue there in the middle talks about some of the, supply constraints that are happening. As Noah mentioned before, we completely overbuilt. When you look at, 2020, 21, that's starting to go down. And then if I share with you one more graphic here, and this I believe is from Newmark, just came out just fairly recently, but I think this is powerful when you start to look out into the future, knowing, especially now, how long it takes to get development done. I think they said in Vegas, it's 560 days is the average. And you start to look out here into 26, 27, 28, 29. Again, assuming that we're not making predictions, but assuming this bears out to be even remotely true, that dramatic reduction in supply is going to bode well for how those assets that are coming out of the ground now or very shortly should perform pretty well in the next few years. What say you, my friend?
Yeah, I think we talked about this a little bit last week, but you actually brought up the point that I think the William Warren Group might have mentioned, that it was the hardest period ever for development. And I think I'm seeing that as I talk to developers every day about how much has to go right for the project to even have hope of getting done. I think it's obviously challenging and frustrating if you're a developer, but holistically for the industry, these are the barriers that they're facing are because of all of the factors that we're talking about. And as less development happens, I think that's obviously beneficial for rates. Sometimes it becomes simple, like it's as simple as supply and demand dynamics. And the more you build, the lower rates will be. So, as development's harder, as the industry's gotten smarter and is making, better decisions, then I think that bears out where you'll have less new supply and a different environment going forward.
Noah Starr, CEO of TractIQ. Noah, I want to give you the last word. Anything else you want to add or share that we haven't talked about?
Chris, we're just getting started here. I mean, I'm so excited to keep doing this with you. You guys are awesome partners, and we're continuing to try to push forward additional data that we can provide, additional insight we can provide. This is Q2's report. Q3 is almost wrapping up, right? So I think hopefully we'll be here in a month and a half or sooner with the next version of the report.
Fantastic. We appreciate the great work you're doing and what you're doing. Obviously, add more transparency to the data. This is Noah Starr. I'm Chris Berg. Thanks for joining us. Please share this